Right now, there's an invisible war happening around you, and you're the prize. Have you ever walked into a room and felt someone's energy shift when they saw you? Like they were calculating something behind their eyes, measuring you in ways that made your skin crawl. Maybe you've wondered why certain people seem absolutely terrified of you, while others see you as an easy target, circling like predators who've caught the scent of wounded prey. There's a profound psychological reason for this that Carl Jung documented in his private research notes, but rarely discussed publicly. What Jung discovered was so revolutionary, so potentially dangerous in the wrong hands, that he kept it classified for decades. According to Jung's secret empath classification system, there are 7 distinct types of empaths, each possessing a specific psychological makeup that renders certain narcissistic tactics not just ineffective, but potentially catastrophic for the manipulator. Before we dive deeper, if this resonates with your soul's journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more transformational content. Your support helps this message reach other souls who need to hear it. What most people don't realize is that you're not just an empath. You're a specific empath archetype with unique psychological defenses that, when activated, make you literally untouchable to certain manipulators. The problem is that most empaths never activate their full potential because they don't understand their specific type. They're applying generic empath advice that wasn't designed for their particular psychological architecture. This is like trying to unlock a sophisticated security system with the wrong code. It simply won't activate no matter how perfectly you execute the instructions. You end up feeling more vulnerable, more confused, more convinced that something is fundamentally wrong with you. But here's what Jung understood that modern psychology has forgotten. Your empathic sensitivity isn't a vulnerability to be managed. It's a sophisticated psychological weapon system waiting to be activated. Each of the 7 deadly empath types represents a different form of psychological intelligence that, when fully expressed, creates not just immunity to manipulation, but an energetic field that makes narcissists unconsciously flee your presence. I've spent years studying these hidden classifications, working with thousands of empaths who've applied Jung's protocols to transform from vulnerable targets into psychologically sovereign beings. What I've discovered is that the moment an empath activates according to their specific type, everything changes. Not just their ability to protect themselves, but their entire relationship with their empathic gifts. Today, I'm going to reveal Jung's complete 7-type classification system, including the specific psychological triggers that activate each type's most powerful defenses. If you've ever felt powerless against manipulation or wondered why you can sense things others can't, what you learn in the next few minutes might completely transform how you understand yourself and navigate every relationship in your life. This isn't theory. This is applied psychological knowledge that's changing lives, breaking generational patterns of abuse, and creating a new breed of empaths who serve as beacons of authentic power rather than magnets for manipulation. Carl Jung's revolutionary discovery began with a simple observation. Not all empaths respond to manipulation the same way. While some seem to attract narcissists like moths to flame, others seem to repel them instinctively. Jung became obsessed with understanding this difference, conducting extensive research that he ultimately deemed too dangerous for general publication. What he discovered challenged everything the psychological community believed about empathic sensitivity. Jung found that empathic ability isn't a monolithic trait, but expresses itself through 7 distinct psychological architectures, each with unique strengths, vulnerabilities, and activation requirements. More importantly, he discovered that each type possesses what he called natural narcissistic immunity that remains dormant until consciously activated. The reason Jung kept this research private wasn't to hoard knowledge, but because he understood that this information in the wrong hands could be used to identify and exploit empaths more effectively. He was particularly concerned about what he called empathic predators, individuals who specifically targeted empaths for their emotional resources. But Jung also understood that empaths themselves needed this knowledge to activate their natural defenses. So he developed what he called the activation principle, a systematic approach to awakening each type's dormant protective capacities. The activation principle operates on a simple premise. Every empath type has a specific psychological function that, when operating unconsciously, creates vulnerability to manipulation. But when that same function becomes conscious and deliberately engaged, it transforms into an impenetrable defense system. Think of it like this. Imagine you have a sophisticated alarm system in your house, but you don't know how to turn it on. Burglars can waltz right in because your protection is dormant. But the moment you learn to activate that system, your house becomes virtually impenetrable. The same protective capacity was always there. It just needed conscious engagement. This is why generic empath advice fails so catastrophically. It treats all empaths as if they have the same psychological makeup, offering one-size-fits-all solutions to vastly different empathic architectures. It's like giving the same key to 7 different locks and wondering why most of them won't open. Jung observed that empaths operating at their natural capacity, without activation, typically function at about 10% of their protective potential. They're like Ferrari engines running on bicycle mechanics. The power is there, but it's not being accessed correctly. When an empath activates according to their specific type, Jung documented a phenomenon he called unconscious recognition. Narcissists and other manipulative personalities begin to avoid the activated empath entirely, not through conscious decision, but through an instinctive response to the absence of the psychological vulnerabilities they're accustomed to exploiting. It's as if manipulators have an internal radar that scans for specific empathic signatures. When they encounter an unactivated empath, the radar lights up, "Target acquired." But when they encounter an activated empath, something strange happens. The radar goes quiet. There's nothing to lock onto because the vulnerabilities they're scanning for simply aren't there. This creates what Jung called effortless boundary maintenance. Boundaries that don't need to be verbally established or actively enforced because they're built into the empath's way of being. The empath doesn't need to identify narcissists or consciously defend against manipulation because their very psychological presence serves as a natural deterrent. But here's where it gets really interesting. Jung discovered that the 7 empath types aren't random variations, but represent a complete psychological ecosystem. Each type serves a specific function in what he called collective empathic intelligence, a distributed network of empathic awareness that, when activated, creates an immune system against manipulation at a societal level. Type 1, the mirror empath. The first deadly empath type Jung identified possesses what he called terrifying reflective capacity. Mirror empaths have an unconscious ability to absorb and then reflect back the shadow material that narcissists work desperately to hide from themselves. Before activation, this quality makes them particularly vulnerable to gaslighting and reality distortion, as they naturally question their perceptions when they conflict with others' stated experiences. Jung observed that mirror empaths operate like psychological mirrors in their natural state, but these mirrors are often clouded by self-doubt and the need for external validation. The narcissist's projections stick to this clouded surface, creating confusion and emotional chaos within the empath. But when the mirror becomes perfectly clear through conscious activation, something extraordinary happens. When mirror empaths activate their conscious witnessing capacity, they develop the ability to reflect back the narcissist's disowned material with surgical precision. This triggers what psychologists now call narcissistic injury cascade, a psychological state where the narcissist's carefully constructed false self begins to disintegrate upon contact. The empath becomes what Jung termed an undistorted mirror of truth that reflects reality without absorption or alteration. The activation process for mirror empaths involves developing what Jung called neutral witnessing, the ability to observe and reflect without emotional investment in the outcome. This requires releasing the compulsion to fix, heal, or save the other person from their own psychological projections. Instead, the mirror empath learns to serve as a clear, undistorted reflection of what is actually present. I once worked with Sarah, a mirror empath, who'd spent years being told she was too sensitive and too reactive by her narcissistic partner. She would absorb his accusations, internalize them, and then spend days questioning her own sanity. Her natural mirroring capacity was being used against her, turned into a weapon for self-destruction rather than a tool for truth-telling. The breakthrough came when she stopped trying to dim her reflective capacity and started using it consciously. During one particularly intense conversation, instead of absorbing his projection that she was crazy and paranoid, she simply reflected it back with perfect neutrality. "It sounds like you're feeling crazy and paranoid right now." The result was immediate and dramatic. He became visibly agitated, then confused, then silent. He couldn't maintain his projection because she wasn't absorbing it. She was simply reflecting it accurately, like a mirror showing him his own emotional state. His usual manipulation tactics bounced off her consciousness and returned to him undistorted. Within weeks, he began avoiding deep conversations with her, entirely claiming she had become weird and different. The relationship began deteriorating rapidly, as he could no longer use her as a dumping ground for his disowned psychological material. Eventually, he ended the relationship, claiming she had changed and become cold. But Sarah hadn't become cold. She'd become conscious. And in her consciousness, his false self couldn't survive. She had transformed from an unconscious mirror that absorbed and distorted his projections into a conscious mirror that reflected truth with perfect clarity. The most remarkable aspect of activated mirror empaths is their ability to trigger what Jung called involuntary self-awareness in narcissists. Simply by maintaining their clear reflective state, they force narcissists to confront their own disowned material. This often leads to one of two outcomes: the narcissist flees to find easier targets, or they begin the difficult work of reclaiming their projected shadow material. Mirror empaths often ask if this makes them manipulative or cruel. Jung's answer was profound. Truth-telling is never manipulation. Reflection is never cruelty. The mirror empath serves reality, not comfort. And reality, however uncomfortable, is the foundation of all genuine healing. Type 2. The Oracle Empath. Oracle empaths possess extraordinary pattern recognition that operates primarily below conscious awareness. They can sense manipulative patterns before they're fully deployed, often experiencing this gift as inexplicable hits about people or situations that they frequently dismiss with logical reasoning. Jung described Oracle empaths as having psychological radar that can detect deception, hidden agendas, and manipulative intent with startling accuracy. Before activation, Oracle empaths are particularly vulnerable to manipulators who use logical-sounding explanations to override their instinctual warning signals. They talk themselves out of what they know to be true, creating perfect conditions for manipulation. The Oracle empath will get a strong intuitive hit that something is wrong, but then spend hours convincing themselves they're being unfair or judgmental. This internal conflict between intuitive knowing and logical reasoning creates what Jung called intuitive paralysis, a state where the empath's natural gift becomes a source of confusion rather than clarity. The Oracle empath begins to distrust their most reliable guidance system, making them vulnerable to sophisticated manipulators who exploit this self-doubt. But when Oracle empaths activate their body-centered knowing, they develop what Jung called psychological X-ray vision. They can perceive manipulation attempts with such precision that the manipulator often finds themselves exposed before they've even finished deploying their tactics. Marcus, an Oracle empath, described his transformation. "I used to think my gut feelings were just anxiety. I'd get this tight sensation in my chest whenever certain people were around, but I'd tell myself I was being judgmental. Learning to trust that physical sensation changed everything. Now I can sense someone's intentions within minutes of meeting them, and my accuracy rate is virtually perfect. The key for Oracle empaths is learning to locate intuitive information in the body rather than trying to validate it with the mind. When this shift occurs, their pattern recognition becomes so accurate that manipulation becomes essentially impossible to execute against them. Type 3. The Fortress Empath. Fortress empaths possess impenetrable energetic sovereignty. They have an extraordinary capacity for what Jung called energetic differentiation, the ability to maintain complete clarity about where they end and others begin, even in the most chaotic emotional environments. Before activation, Fortress empaths often experience overwhelming sensitivity to others' emotional states, leading to constant emotional contagion and difficulty distinguishing between their feelings and those they're absorbing. This makes them perfect targets for emotional manipulation and energy vampirism. But when Fortress empaths activate their differentiation capacity, they develop immunity to every form of emotional manipulation that relies on boundary confusion. Unlike other empath types, who might need to remove themselves from overwhelming situations, activated Fortress empaths can remain fully present while maintaining perfect emotional clarity. Lisa, a Fortress empath, worked in a toxic corporate environment where emotional manipulation was standard practice. Before activation, she'd leave work every day emotionally depleted, carrying everyone else's stress and anxiety. The transformation came when she learned to identify the subtle qualitative difference between self-generated emotions and absorbed ones. Self-generated emotions feel integrated, she explained. Absorbed emotions feel foreign, like wearing someone else's clothes. Once I could feel that difference, everything shifted. I could sit in the most toxic meetings and remain completely centered. Their emotional chaos simply couldn't penetrate my awareness anymore. Type 4. The Alchemist Empath. Alchemist empaths possess the extraordinary capacity for psychological alchemy, the ability to absorb negative emotional energy and transmute it into something entirely different. Before activation, they often find themselves serving as emotional processing centers for everyone around them, absorbing toxicity and frequently becoming ill or depleted as a result. Jung observed that unactivated alchemist empaths operate like unconscious emotional recycling centers, taking in psychological waste but lacking the conscious capacity to transform it effectively. This creates dangerous accumulation of toxic emotional material that can manifest as physical illness, chronic fatigue, or anxiety disorders. When alchemist empaths activate their conscious transmutation capacity, they develop what Jung called alchemical immunity. Rather than serving as passive receptacles for others' unprocessed material, they become active transformers who receive negative energy, consciously engage with its transformation, and return it in an altered state. Dr. Rebecca, a therapist and alchemist empath, discovered her gift while working with challenging clients. Before activation, she would absorb her clients' trauma and carry it home with her, often experiencing nightmares and emotional exhaustion. I learned to receive their emotional material consciously and work with it intentionally, she explained. I could feel their pain allow it to move through me and somehow transform it into compassion. My clients began having breakthrough sessions while I felt energized rather than depleted. This capacity renders projection-based manipulation completely ineffective, because the projected material undergoes transformation in the presence of the activated alchemist empath, often leaving the projector confused about why their usual tactics aren't working. Type 5. The Sovereign Empath. Sovereign empaths possess what Jung called complete psychological autonomy, a state where external validation and approval have zero impact on their sense of self or perception of reality. Before activation, they often appear highly susceptible to approval-seeking behaviors and people-pleasing tendencies, making them seem like easy targets for manipulation. Jung observed that sovereign empaths before activation operate from external self-referencing, constantly checking their worth against other people's opinions. This creates profound disconnection from their internal guidance system and makes them vulnerable to manipulation that leverages the need for approval. But when sovereign empaths activate their self-referencing capacity, they undergo what Jung described as the ultimate psychological liberation, a complete disconnection of their self-concept from external validation. This requires learning to check every perception and decision against an internal standard rather than an external one. James, a sovereign empath, described his transformation. "I was completely addicted to other people's approval. I would change my opinions based on who I was talking to. The breakthrough came when I realized I didn't care what my narcissistic mother thought, not in a bitter way, but in a completely neutral way. Her opinion simply had no bearing on my reality anymore." This creates the most profound form of immunity to narcissistic manipulation because nearly all such tactics rely on leveraging the target's need for approval, validation, or acceptance. When this need no longer exists, the manipulator finds themselves without any psychological leverage whatsoever. Type 6. The shadowseer empath. The shadowseer empath possesses the ability to see directly into others' hidden shame and disowned aspects. These empaths can perceive the wounded child beneath the grandiose mask, the terror beneath the rage, the emptiness beneath the superiority. Before activation, they often find themselves trapped in caretaking roles with narcissists, trying to heal their hidden wounds while being manipulated and abused. Jung observed that unactivated shadowseer empaths develop savior complex syndrome, the compulsive need to rescue others from their psychological darkness. They can see the wounded child beneath the narcissist's mask and mistakenly believe that understanding equals healing responsibility. But when shadowseer empaths activate their witness consciousness, they develop the ability to see narcissistic wounds without taking responsibility for healing them. They learn to separate seeing from healing, understanding from responsibility, compassion from enablement. Catherine, a shadowseer empath, worked with her narcissistic boss for years, always making excuses for his behavior because she could see his deep insecurity. "I could see that beneath his arrogance was a terrified little boy," she explained. "I thought my job was to provide the understanding he never received." The activation came when she learned to witness his shadow without taking action. "I realized that seeing his wounded child didn't make me his mother or his therapist. I could acknowledge his pain without absorbing responsibility for fixing it." The change was immediate. He became incredibly uncomfortable around me, like I knew his deepest secret, which I did. He couldn't maintain his superior facade because I could see right through it. Within a month, he transferred me to a different department, claiming we weren't a good fit. Type 7. The Phoenix Empath. Phoenix empaths possess the most paradoxical gift. They become stronger through adversity, using manipulation attempts as fuel for their own growth and transformation. Jung considered this the most evolutionary of all empath types, describing them as psychological alchemists who transform poison into medicine through the fire of conscious suffering. Before activation, Phoenix empaths often find themselves repeatedly targeted by narcissists and other manipulative individuals, seemingly unable to break free from abusive patterns. Jung observed that unactivated Phoenix empaths operate in what he called unconscious martyrdom mode, attracting suffering without understanding how to transform it into strength. This creates a tragic cycle where Phoenix empaths endure repeated trauma, abuse, and manipulation while unconsciously believing that their suffering serves some higher purpose. They often develop what Jung termed sacred victim identity, the belief that their pain makes them more spiritual, compassionate, or evolved than others. The unconscious Phoenix empath becomes a magnet for narcissists precisely because they possess an extraordinary capacity to endure abuse while continuing to love, forgive, and hope for change. Jung documented that Phoenix empaths often remain in toxic relationships and situations far longer than any other empath type, because they unconsciously believe that their suffering is transforming both themselves and their abusers. This creates what Jung called the Phoenix paradox. The very gift that makes them capable of extraordinary transformation also makes them vulnerable to extraordinary exploitation. Their natural resilience becomes a liability when it's used unconsciously, enabling abusers to inflict damage that would destroy other personality types. Before activation, Phoenix empaths often experience what Jung described as repetitive trauma patterns, finding themselves in similar abusive situations with different people, as if they're unconsciously seeking opportunities to transform suffering into strength, but lacking the conscious capacity to complete the alchemical process. Jung observed that unactivated Phoenix empaths often develop complex trauma responses, including hypervigilance, emotional numbing, and dissociation, while simultaneously maintaining an almost supernatural capacity for forgiveness and hope. This combination makes them both incredibly wounded and incredibly healing, often attracting others who seek to be healed while offering nothing in return. But when Phoenix empaths activate their adversarial alchemy capacity, they develop the ability to transform every attack into evolutionary fuel. Each manipulation attempt becomes a gift that accelerates their psychological development rather than depleting their resources. This transformation is often triggered by what Jung called the final awakening, a moment of profound clarity where the Phoenix empath realizes that their suffering has been preparation for their power. The activation process involves learning to work consciously with adversity rather than simply enduring it. Phoenix empaths must develop what Jung termed conscious suffering, the ability to experience difficult emotions and situations while simultaneously extracting their transformational essence. This requires a fundamental shift from victim consciousness to victor consciousness, from seeing challenges as things that happen to them to seeing challenges as opportunities for growth and empowerment. The activated Phoenix empath learns to ask not, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "How is this making me stronger?" Maria, a Phoenix empath, endured decades of narcissistic abuse before her activation. "I attracted one narcissist after another," she explained. "My mother, my first husband, several bosses, even friends. I thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me, like I had a target on my back that only abusers could see." For years, Maria remained trapped in what she now recognizes as unconscious martyrdom. "I would endure incredible abuse while telling myself that my suffering was somehow noble, that I was learning important lessons about compassion and forgiveness. I was always waiting for my abusers to recognize my goodness and change, but they never did." The awakening came during her second divorce, when Maria realized that her pattern of attracting narcissists wasn't random, but purposeful. "I suddenly understood that every narcissist in my life had been a teacher," she explained. "Not because they meant to help me, but because their attacks forced me to develop psychological muscles I never knew I had. I realized that each abusive relationship had made me stronger, wiser, more discerning, and more self-reliant. The last narcissist I encountered was so frustrated by my responses that he actually said, 'It's like you're immune to everything I do.' And he was right. I had become immune, not through armor, but through transformation." Maria's activation involved learning to consciously extract wisdom from every difficult experience. Instead of just enduring abuse, I started asking what each situation was teaching me about boundaries, self-worth, discernment, and personal power. Every attack became data for my growth rather than evidence of my victimhood. The transformation was remarkable. Narcissists started avoiding me entirely. Maria reported, "Something in my energy field had shifted. Where I used to radiate victim energy that attracted predators, I now radiated sovereign energy that repelled them. Jung observed that activated Phoenix empaths often become the most powerful healers and teachers because they've transmuted their deepest wounds into their greatest wisdom. They embody the possibility of transformation through adversity, showing others that suffering is not meaningless, but can be alchemized into strength. Narcissists unconsciously recognize this invulnerability and typically avoid Phoenix empaths entirely, sensing that any attack will only make them stronger. When forced to interact with activated Phoenix empaths, manipulators often find their tactics not just ineffective, but actually empowering their intended victim. The most remarkable aspect of Phoenix empaths is their ability to transform not just their own suffering, but to create healing spaces for others who have endured similar trauma. They become living proof that no amount of abuse can destroy the human spirit when it's consciously engaged with its own transformation. Jung noted that Phoenix empaths often report feeling grateful for their difficult experiences once they've learned to transform them consciously. This isn't Stockholm Syndrome or spiritual bypassing, he clarified. It's the recognition that their capacity to transform poison into medicine has made them capable of helping others do the same. Their wounds become their wisdom, and their wisdom becomes their gift to the world. Understanding your empath type is only the beginning. True transformation occurs through activation, the conscious engagement of your type's specific psychological functions. Jung observed that most empaths are actually combinations of 2 or 3 types, with one serving as their dominant function. This creates unique activation requirements that can't be addressed with generic approaches. For example, a primarily mirror empath with oracle as their secondary type needs to focus first on conscious witnessing, while developing body-centered perception as a supporting practice. A fortress empath with alchemist tendencies needs to master energetic differentiation while learning conscious transmutation techniques. Jung identified several hybrid combinations that are particularly powerful once activated. The mirror's sovereign combination creates what he called the ultimate narcissistic deterrent, an empath who can perfectly reflect disowned material while remaining completely unmoved by reactions to this reflection. The Oracle Phoenix combination develops preemptive evolutionary immunity, the ability to sense manipulation attempts and use them as catalysts for immediate growth. The activation process itself follows a predictable pattern. First comes recognition, identifying your primary empath type and understanding its unique gifts and vulnerabilities. Then comes practice, deliberately engaging your type's specific activation triggers in low-stakes situations. Finally comes integration, embodying your activated state as your natural way of being. The 30-day transformation protocol Jung developed involves daily practices specific to each type. Mirror empaths practice conscious witnessing, spending 10 minutes each day observing their emotional reactions without judgment or intervention. Oracle empaths develop body-centered perception, learning to locate intuitive information in physical sensations rather than mental analysis. Fortress empaths work on energetic differentiation, practicing the subtle art of distinguishing between self-generated and absorbed emotions. Alchemist empaths engage in conscious transmutation, deliberately working with absorbed negative energy to transform its quality. Sovereign empaths develop self-referencing, checking every decision against internal rather than external standards. Shadowseer empaths practice shadow integration work, learning to witness others' hidden aspects without taking responsibility for healing them. Phoenix empaths cultivate adversarial alchemy, consciously transforming challenges into growth opportunities. But activation isn't without its obstacles. Many empaths experience guilt about becoming untouchable, fearing they'll lose their empathic heart or become cold and disconnected. Others face resistance from family members and friends who benefit from their previous vulnerability. The truth is that activation enhances rather than diminishes empathic capacity. Activated empaths become more effective at genuine connection, more precise in their empathic understanding, and more capable of offering authentic support without self-depletion. They don't lose their empathic gifts. They learn to use them consciously rather than being used by them. Perhaps the most significant obstacle is what Jung called empathic guilt. The belief that having boundaries or being untouchable to manipulation somehow makes you less caring or compassionate. This guilt often stems from conditioning by manipulative people who've convinced empaths that their vulnerability is a virtue. But Jung understood that unactivated empaths often enable rather than heal. Their unconscious absorption of others' dysfunction prevents those individuals from facing the consequences of their behavior. Activated empaths, by maintaining clear boundaries and refusing to absorb others' unprocessed material, actually create conditions that encourage genuine growth and accountability. The integration phase requires developing what Jung called conscious empathy, the ability to feel with others while maintaining perfect clarity about emotional boundaries. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about engaging from a place of centered awareness rather than reactive absorption. When this integration is complete, extraordinary things begin to happen. Narcissists and other manipulative personalities seem to recognize the activation at an unconscious level and begin avoiding the activated empath entirely. It's as if they can sense that their usual tactics will be ineffective or even dangerous to deploy against this particular target. The moment your activation is complete, your entire reality shifts. People begin treating you differently, though they often can't articulate why. You'll notice that manipulative individuals become uncomfortable in your presence, while authentic people are drawn to your energy like flowers to sunlight. Your empathic abilities don't diminish. They become exponentially more precise and effective. You can sense others' emotional states with extraordinary accuracy while maintaining perfect clarity about where you end and they begin. You can offer genuine support and healing without depleting your own resources. You become what Jung called a conscious empathic instrument, capable of receiving processing and responding to emotional information with surgical precision. But perhaps the most profound shift is in how you experience your own sensitivity. What once felt like a burden becomes your greatest strength. Your emotional receptivity, instead of making you vulnerable, becomes a sophisticated guidance system that helps you navigate complex human dynamics with unprecedented accuracy. The ripple effects extend far beyond your personal relationships. One activated empath can shift entire family systems, breaking generational patterns of manipulation and abuse, simply by refusing to participate in dysfunctional dynamics. Your activation gives others permission to activate their own empathic sovereignty. I've witnessed this phenomenon countless times. When one family member activates, others begin questioning their own tolerance for manipulation. When one colleague stops absorbing workplace toxicity, it forces the entire system to find new equilibrium. Your transformation becomes a catalyst for collective healing. This is why Jung believed activated empaths would play a crucial role in humanity's psychological evolution. As more empaths activate according to their specific types, it creates what he called empathic herd immunity, a collective resistance to manipulation that makes toxic behavior increasingly ineffective on a societal level. Living as an activated empath also means accepting the responsibility that comes with this power. You become a beacon for other awakening empaths, a living example of what's possible when sensitivity is transformed from vulnerability into strength. People will look to you for guidance, and it's important to remember that your primary teaching occurs through your way of being, rather than your words. Your continuing journey involves maintaining your activated state through regular practice and staying connected with other activated empaths. The path can be lonely at times, as you may find yourself outgrowing relationships and environments that once felt comfortable. But this isn't loss, it's evolution. You'll also discover that your empathic gifts continue developing in unexpected directions. Many activated empaths report enhanced intuitive abilities, deeper spiritual connections, and an increased capacity for what Jung called empathic healing. the ability to facilitate others' healing simply through conscious presence. The signs that your activation is complete are unmistakable. Manipulative people either avoid you entirely or find their tactics backfiring when deployed against you. You feel energized rather than depleted after interactions with challenging individuals. Your emotional responses become precise instruments rather than reactive patterns. You trust your perceptions completely, regardless of others' attempts to convince you otherwise. Most importantly, you embody a truth that transforms everyone you encounter. Your sensitivity is not your weakness. Your sensitivity is your superpower. You were never meant to be prey. You were designed to be magnificently, untouchably yourself. The world needs activated empaths now more than ever. In a time when manipulation has become sophisticated and widespread, empaths who've activated their natural immunity serve as immune cells in the collective consciousness, neutralizing toxic patterns and modeling what authentic power looks like. Your transformation heals not just you, but everyone whose life you touch. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to demonstrate that empathy and strength aren't opposites, but partners in the dance of conscious relationship. You show others that it's possible to remain open-hearted while being energetically impenetrable, to care deeply, while maintaining perfect boundaries, to love unconditionally, while refusing to enable dysfunction. This is your invitation to step fully into your role as an activated empath. To embrace the psychological sovereignty that is your birthright. To transform your beautiful sensitivity from a liability into the powerful force for healing and transformation it was always meant to be. Which of these 7 types calls to your soul? Which activation protocol feels like the key you've been searching for? Your journey toward empathic sovereignty begins with this recognition, this moment of seeing yourself clearly for the first time. You are not here to be anyone's victim. You are here to be magnificently, powerfully, untouchably you. The time for hiding your light is over. The world is waiting for your fully activated empathic brilliance to shine. But remember, true empowerment comes not from feeling superior to others or from believing you're invulnerable to all forms of influence. Activated empaths understand that healthy relationships involve mutual respect, vulnerability, and growth. The goal isn't to become emotionally isolated or to view all emotional connection as potential manipulation. As you step into this new way of being, stay grounded in self-reflection and continue developing emotional intelligence alongside your protective capacities. The most powerful empaths are those who can maintain both strength and genuine openness, discernment, and compassion. Your activated state should enhance your ability to form authentic connections, not wall you off from meaningful relationships. If you find yourself becoming cynical, distrustful of all emotional expression, or unable to experience genuine intimacy, it may be worth examining whether you're developing healthy boundaries or defensive barriers. Jung understood that true psychological sovereignty includes the wisdom to know when to be protective and when to be receptive, when to maintain boundaries, and when to allow authentic vulnerability. The activated empath doesn't live in a fortress, but moves through the world with conscious choice about how and when to engage emotionally. This discernment comes with experience and continued self-awareness. As you practice these new capacities, check in regularly with yourself about your motivations, your relationship patterns, and your overall well-being. Are you using your empathic gifts to enhance connection and understanding? Or are you unconsciously using them to maintain control or avoid genuine intimacy? The journey of empathic activation is ultimately about becoming more fully yourself. Not a defended version of yourself, but an authentic version that can engage with life's complexities from a place of centered awareness rather than reactive vulnerability. This balance between strength and openness, protection and connection, is the true hallmark of empathic mastery. As you continue this journey, remember that growth is ongoing. Your empathic capacities will continue evolving, and your understanding of healthy boundaries will deepen with experience. Trust the process, stay connected to supportive community, and never stop learning about yourself and how you relate to others. The world indeed needs empaths who can model this balance. Those who demonstrate that sensitivity and strength can coexist, that emotional awareness can be a source of power rather than vulnerability, and that authentic relationships are possible even in a world where manipulation exists. Your transformation is both personal and collective. By becoming an activated empath, you contribute to a more conscious, compassionate world, where emotional manipulation becomes increasingly obsolete, not through force or resistance, but through the simple presence of people who embody a healthier way of being.